Hey everyone. So, I'm Lucia. I'm 31 years old, and I live here in Barcelona. Right now, things are good. More than good, honestly. I'm running my own business, one I built from the ground up. It's thriving. I have peace. But it wasn't always like this. Not even close. For years, my life felt like a silent negotiation, a constant shrinking of myself to fit inside the small box my family had built for me. They saw me in a certain way, quiet, perhaps a little naive, definitely not ambitious in the way they understood it. Ambition, in my family, meant suits, boardrooms, inheriting established names. It meant my uncle's massive distribution empire, built on generations of contracts and connections. When I first told them about my idea, an eco-friendly cleaning service focused on sustainable products and ethical labor practices, the response wasn't just lukewarm. It was icy, followed by polite, condescending laughter. I remember the exact moment. It was during one of our notoriously long, noisy Sunday lunches at my grandparents' sprawling apartment. The air was thick with the smell of slow-cooked sofrito and the drone of my uncle Ricardo holding court. I had waited for a lull in the conversation, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I'd practiced my pitch in my head 100 times. I talked about the growing demand for sustainable services, the market gap, my passion for environmental responsibility, the business model. I saw it as innovative, necessary, the future. My uncle Ricardo, a man whose laugh boomed across rooms and whose opinion was gospel, leaned back in his chair, a piece of Jamin halfway to his mouth. He looked at me over his spectacles, a slow smile spreading across his face. Lucia, querida, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. Cleaning? You want to be? A cleaner? The table erupted in gentle chuckles. My cousins exchanged smirks. My aunt patted my hand, a look of pity in her eyes. Lucia, honey, you're so smart, she said. Surely you can do something more substantial, something that uses your education? It wasn't just the words. It was the utter lack of belief, the instant dismissal of my vision as something frivolous, beneath me, or perhaps, beneath them. My quiet passion, my carefully researched plan, my burning desire to build something meaningful, reduced to a punchline. It felt like a physical blow. That day, I learned that in my family, your worth wasn't just about what you achieved, but whether your achievement fit within their narrow, traditional definition of success. My little eco-cleaning startup didn't, not even a little bit. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment like that, where someone you loved completely dismissed something you were passionate about? It's a unique kind of hurt, isn't it? Stick around, because that moment was just the beginning. It's the story of how being underestimated became my greatest advantage. The laughter echoed in my ears long after the lunch ended. It wasn't just Ricardo, though his booming condescension had landed the hardest blow. It was the collective shrug, the quick change of subject back to real business, imports, logistics, market shares in commodities. My venture was seen as a quaint hobby, a phase I would hopefully get over before settling down or finding a proper job, maybe even within the hallowed halls of Ricardo Distribution. My apartment, a small rented space in the example, felt both like a sanctuary and a cage in those early days. It was where the idea had been born, fueled by late nights researching sustainable products, drafting business plans, and sketching out logos on cheap paper. But it was also where the weight of their dismissal settled most heavily. I looked at my notes, my carefully crafted projections, and for a moment, the doubt they had planted began to bloom like a toxic weed. Were they right? Was it foolish? Was I just setting myself up for failure and more ridicule? The silence from my family after that lunch was louder than the laughter. No one called to ask how the hobby was going. No one offered support, advice, or even a simple word of encouragement. It was as if I hadn't said anything at all, as if my dream was so insignificant it didn't warrant acknowledgement, positive or negative. This was their way of keeping me in my box. polite, passive, dismissal. But something else had taken root alongside the doubt. A stubborn, simmering resentment. Their lack of faith didn't extinguish my desire, it solidified it. I wouldn't just start the business, I would make it succeed. Not for them, but despite them. It became a quiet act of rebellion, a refusal to be defined by their limited vision of me. I threw myself into the work. Every evening after finishing my part-time administrative job, I would come home and work on the business until exhaustion claimed me. I built a simple website myself, armed with free online tutorials. I sourced ethical, biodegradable cleaning supplies, navigating complicated supply chains and minimum order quantities. I walked miles around the city, distributing flyers to small businesses, cafes, boutiques, offices, places that might value the eco aspect. The first few months were brutal. There were days I made no calls, got no responses, booked no jobs. Money was terrifyingly tight. I ate cheap pasta, rationed coffee, and learned to fix everything myself. The unseen labor wasn't just cleaning toilets, it was the relentless, invisible grind of building a foundation from nothing. It was the emotional labor of silencing the voices of doubt, both internal and external. It was showing up every single day, even when every fiber of my being screamed to give up. My friends were supportive, bless them. They listened patiently to my woes, offered encouragement, and some even became my first clients. But they weren't family. There was a specific kind of ache that only came from the lack of validation from the people whose opinion, whether I wanted it to or not, still held a certain weight. Family gatherings became an exercise in evasion. "How's work, Lucia?" someone might ask, usually in passing. I'd give a non-committal answer. I stopped bringing it up. They didn't ask for details, and I stopped offering them. It was easier that way. Less risk of facing the polite smiles and veiled pity. I existed in a separate sphere, my burgeoning reality invisible to them. One memorable Christmas dinner, my cousin Elena, who worked in marketing for Ricardo Distribution, regaled everyone with stories of closing a major deal, the millions involved, the trips abroad. The applause was enthusiastic, Ricardo beaming with pride. Later, Elena cornered me by the dessert table. "Still doing the cleaning thing, Lucia?" she asked, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. I nodded. Must be. Tiring. It wasn't malicious, not exactly. Just the casual, unquestioned assumption that my work was fundamentally less important, less valuable, less work than hers. The unspoken question hung in the air. When are you going to do something that matters? I cleaned offices late at night, the hum of the city outside the windows, a quiet counterpoint to the scrubbing and polishing. I cleaned small shops before they opened, inhaling the clean scent of citrus and lavender from my eco-products. I cleaned apartments, carefully, respectfully, building a reputation for reliability and quality, always using my sustainable methods. Each cleaned space was a small victory, a tangible result of my effort, something the abstract world of distribution contracts couldn't offer me. Slowly, painstakingly, the business grew. Referrals started coming in. I hired my first employee, a woman named Carmen who was meticulous and shared my values. Then another, and another. We invested in better equipment. We expanded our service area. We secured larger contracts with bigger offices and commercial spaces that were actively seeking green solutions. The name Lucia's Eco Clean started to mean something in certain circles in Barcelona. We weren't the cheapest, but we were known for our quality, our reliability, and our genuine commitment to sustainability. Clients appreciated that we used products that weren't harsh chemicals, that our staff were treated well and paid fairly. These were the values I built the business on, the antithesis of the old-school cutthroat mentality I associated with my family's world. While my world was expanding, building outwards client by client, contract by contract, my family's world seemed static, even subtly shrinking. I would hear snippets at gatherings, vague complaints about market pressures, increased competition, rising costs. Ricardo Distribution, the seemingly unshakable empire, was facing challenges. The rise of smaller, more agile companies, changing consumer demands, and a general shift towards more ethical and sustainable practices were chipping away at their market share. They were slow to adapt, too comfortable in their established ways, too convinced of their own invincibility. I didn't gloat, not outwardly, anyway. The old dynamics were still in play. At family events, my success, if mentioned at all, was downplayed. Lucia's doing well with her little cleaning service. My mother might say pride warring awkwardly with her deep-seated desire for me to have a more respectable career. Ricardo still held court, still dismissed newer business models with a wave of his hand. His struggles were whispered about, treated as temporary setbacks, never as fundamental flaws in his approach. I continued to work, building my business, consolidating my position. I learned about finance, negotiation, HR, marketing, everything you need to run a successful company. The skills I was acquiring were far more diverse and hard-won than those gained by slotting into an existing corporate structure. I was becoming a true entrepreneur, adaptable and resilient. A turning point came when a large office complex, one I had been courting for months, finally signed a major contract with Lucia's EcoClean. It was a significant win, securing stable revenue for a long period and allowing me to hire several more employees. Around the same time, I heard through the grapevine a casual comment from a relative who knew someone working there that Ricardo Distribution had lost a major logistics contract with that same complex. They had been handling their internal distribution and warehousing. The complex was consolidating suppliers and looking for companies with modern practices, including environmental certifications. My eco-friendly approach, the very thing my family had scoffed at, was now a key competitive advantage. This wasn't just a coincidence, it was a pattern. More businesses were prioritizing sustainability, ethical sourcing, and responsible partnerships. Ricardo Distribution, with its old trucks, outdated warehousing practices, and lack of environmental initiatives, was falling behind. His advantage lay in long-standing relationships, many built on favors and family ties generations ago, but those ties were loosening in the face of a changing world. The idea began to form slowly, almost subconsciously at first. It was a seed planted by years of frustration and dismissal. I watched Ricardo, still proud and oblivious to the fundamental shifts happening around him, clinging to the ways things had always been done. His employees were unhappy, murmuring about low wages and poor conditions. His infrastructure was aging. His debt was mounting. My business, meanwhile, was lean, adaptable, and aligned with the future. I had built relationships based on merit, transparency, and shared values. I understood the importance of modern logistics and efficient supply chains, even on a smaller scale. I had the vision he lacked. Could I actually compete with him? Could my small, eco-focused company go head-to-head with Ricardo Distribution, the giant that had always overshadowed me? The thought was audacious, almost frightening, but the seed had sprouted. I started paying closer attention. I analyzed Ricardo Distribution's public financial statements, their market position, their key clients. I saw vulnerabilities where he saw stability. I saw opportunities where he saw obstacles. The large contracts he was losing were precisely the kind of contracts my business, with a slight pivot and expansion into related services, could handle. The idea solidified into a strategic plan. I wouldn't just compete, I would target his weaknesses. I would offer the modern, sustainable, ethically run alternative that his disgruntled clients were looking for. I would build relationships with businesses actively seeking change, not those tied to the past. It wasn't about revenge, not purely. It was about validation, yes, but more importantly, it was about seizing an opportunity I was uniquely positioned to take. I had the industry knowledge he didn't respect, the business acumen he didn't believe I possessed, and the values that were becoming increasingly important in the market. I started quietly, cautiously. I identified clients who had recently ended contracts with Ricardo Distribution or who were rumored to be unhappy. I approached them not as a cleaning service, but as a partner for their logistical and operational needs, highlighting our efficiency, our modern systems, and our undeniable environmental credentials. It was slow work, requiring patience and persistence, but it paid off. My reputation for reliability and ethical practices opened doors. Businesses were tired of the old ways, the opaque pricing, the environmental disregard. My transparent, values-driven approach resonated. I secured several significant logistics and facilities management contracts that had previously belonged, in part or in whole, to Ricardo Distribution. These weren't cleaning contracts. They were contracts for managing internal deliveries, handling waste streams efficiently, overseeing facility supplies, services that overlapped with distribution and facilities management, areas where my business had naturally expanded as it grew. Each contract I won felt like another brick in the wall I was building, a wall separating me from the family's dismissive past. Each win was a quiet triumph, a silent answer to the laughter that had stung me years ago. Meanwhile, the whispers about Ricardo Distribution grew louder. Suppliers were getting restless about late payments. Employees were leaving. Rumors circulated about desperate measures, like taking on unfavorable loans just to manage cash flow. Ricardo was losing his grip, and everyone in the family seemed to know it, though no one dared to confront him directly. Their solution was to pretend it wasn't happening or to talk vaguely about needing new strategies. One evening, my father called me, something he rarely did just to chat about business. He sounded hesitant. "Lucia," he began, "your uncle Ricardo. Well, things aren't going well for him. The business is really struggling." I listened calmly, outwardly sympathetic, inwardly recognizing the confirmation of everything I had observed and acted upon. He talked about the debt, the loss of major clients, Ricardo's stubborn refusal to change or accept help. He's talking about looking for investors, or maybe selling parts of the business, my father admitted, his voice low, as if sharing a shameful secret. This was it. The moment the possibility I had only dared to whisper to myself became a concrete reality. Ricardo Distribution wasn't just struggling, it was potentially available. My heart began to race, not just with anticipation, but with a complex mix of fear, vindication, and a strange sense of destiny. Could I, Lucia, the little cleaner, actually acquire the company that had for so long symbolized everything I wasn't in my family's eyes? The company whose patriarch had laughed at my dreams. I spent weeks consulting with my lawyer and my financial advisor. They were initially skeptical, but quickly became impressed by my business's growth, my understanding of the market, and my strategic vision. They helped me analyze Ricardo Distribution's true financial state, which was even worse than the rumors suggested. An acquisition wouldn't be simple. It would require significant capital, navigating complex legal and financial hurdles, and, perhaps most dauntingly, dealing directly with Ricardo and the rest of my family. I decided to approach it formally, through the proper channels, rather than via family whispers. I instructed my lawyer to make an inquiry, expressing interest in acquiring specific assets or potentially the entire company, contingent on thorough due diligence. The news hit my family like a bomb. My father called again, his voice a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Lucia, is this true? Are you trying to buy Ricardo's company?" "Dad," I said, keeping my voice steady, "his company is in trouble. My company is doing well and is looking to expand. It's a business opportunity." "But it's Ricardo, it's family," he spluttered. "It's business, Dad," I repeated, feeling a newfound strength in drawing that line. "And his business is failing because it hasn't adapted. Mine has." Ricardo's reaction was predictable. Outrage. He initially refused to even meet with my representatives. "That child? That cleaner? She thinks she can buy my company?" He reportedly bellowed. His pride was deeply wounded. The idea that the person he had so casually dismissed could possibly have the capacity, let alone the audacity, to acquire his life's work was unfathomable to him. But desperation is a powerful motivator. As his financial situation worsened and other potential buyers, if there were any serious ones, weren't materializing, his advisors, likely less sentimental than him, must have pushed him. He finally agreed to a meeting. It wasn't at his grand corporate office, but in a neutral conference room arranged by the lawyers. I walked in, accompanied by my legal and financial team. Ricardo was there with his own advisors, looking older, his usual bluster tempered by visible strain. The air was thick with unspoken history, years of dismissal, quiet resentment, and now, this surreal reversal of fortune. He avoided my gaze at first, addressing my lawyer. My lawyer began the formal discussion, outlining our offer, based on our due diligence findings. It was a fair offer, given the company's debt and declining value, but likely far less than Ricardo believed his empire was worth. Ricardo interrupted, finally looking at me. His eyes held a mixture of anger and a flicker of something that might have been shame or confusion. "Lucia," he said, his voice rough. "Why are you doing this, trying to take advantage of family?" I met his gaze directly, perhaps for the first time in my life. "Tio Ricardo," I said, using the formal address. "I'm doing this because it's a sound business decision. Your company has valuable assets, but it's mismanaged and outdated. My company is strong, forward-thinking, and needs to grow. This acquisition is a logical step for my expansion." "Your company," he scoffed, the old dismissiveness creeping back in despite his weakened position. "A cleaning service." "It started as a cleaning service," I corrected him, my voice firm, "but it grew. Because I worked tirelessly. Because I built it on sound principles. Because I listened to the market. While you were comfortable." I didn't raise my voice, but the words landed with the weight of years of silent struggle. "I built a business that's profitable and sustainable, in every sense of the word. And now, that business is in a position to acquire yours." He flushed, gripping the edge of the table. "You've been circling, haven't you? Stealing my clients." "I won contracts," I stated plainly. "Contracts that you lost because you weren't competitive. Businesses need modern solutions, Tio. They needed what I offered, not what you were stuck providing." The negotiation was tense, difficult. Ricardo alternated between indignant fury and reluctant pragmatism, pushed by his advisors. There were moments he tried to play on family sentiment, on loyalty. But I held firm. This wasn't about sentiment, it was about business, and about finally, irrevocably, reclaiming my own power. I wouldn't allow myself to be emotional. I wouldn't let the years of hurt dictate my actions in the boardroom, only the strategic vision. My team handled the complex financial and legal details, while I remained the unwavering face of Lucia's Eco-Clean, the company that was about to swallow the giant. The final agreement was signed several weeks later. Lucia's Eco-Clean, the little startup born from dismissal and fueled by unseen labor, officially acquired Ricardo Distribution. The empire built by generations, the symbol of my family's traditional success, was now part of my company. The family reaction was varied. Shock was universal. Some relatives were openly hostile, accusing me of being ruthless, of betraying family. Others were silently resentful. A few, very few, expressed a grudging admiration. My father was complex, proud of my success, yet deeply uncomfortable with the way it had come at Ricardo's expense. Ricardo himself retreated. He signed the papers, his face pale, and vanished from most family gatherings. The man who had once filled every room with his presence was suddenly small, his identity intrinsically tied to the business he had lost. The period immediately following the acquisition was challenging, albeit in a different way than the early days of scraping by. Integrating the two companies required navigating different cultures, systems, and employee expectations. Ricardo Distribution employees were initially wary, unsure what to expect from the eco-cleaner who was now their boss. I didn't sweep into their old offices like a conqueror. I spent time listening. I met with department heads, with long-term employees. I acknowledged the history of Ricardo distribution while clearly outlining my vision for the future, a future based on efficiency, modernization, and sustainability. I implemented better working conditions and fairer wages, which quickly won over many of the staff. I kept the most valuable assets, the warehousing facilities, the logistics network, some key long-standing contracts, the ones I hadn't already taken. I shed the outdated practices, the inefficient systems, the excess bureaucracy. I rebranded, merging the strengths of both, focusing on modern, efficient, and environmentally conscious distribution and logistics solutions. Lucia Logistics and Eco Solutions was the new name. The transformation wasn't just corporate, it was deeply personal. I no longer felt like the overlooked, underestimated Lucia. I was the CEO, the owner, the decision maker. My voice carried weight, not because of my family name, but because of my proven capability. My relationship with my family shifted irrevocably. I was no longer seeking their approval or trying to fit their mold. They had to contend with my reality. Some kept their distance. Others tried awkwardly to bridge the gap. My mother, seeing my undeniable success and the respect I commanded, finally allowed herself to be truly proud. The condescending pity was replaced by a kind of awe. I learned to set boundaries I hadn't dared to set before. I no longer attended every single family event if it felt draining. I politely but firmly shut down conversations that veered into the past, the acquisition, or veiled criticisms. My time and energy were valuable, and I reserved them for people and situations that nourished, not depleted, me. There was a sense of quiet satisfaction, but not gloating. The years of hard work, sacrifice, and dismissal had been painful, but they had forged me. They had given me the resilience, the understanding of true value, not just perceived status, and the strategic thinking that allowed me to build something successful from scratch, and eventually, yes, acquire the very thing that had been used to diminish me. The unseen female labor that had defined my early years, the relentless work behind the scenes, the emotional fortitude required to persevere in the face of dismissal, was now visible, undeniable, and had built an empire. I had taken the skills learned in the trenches of scrubbing floors and managing small accounts and applied them to the complexities of corporate acquisition and large-scale logistics. My perspective on family, on success, and on self-worth had fundamentally changed. I no longer craved their validation. My worth wasn't measured by their standards, but by my own achievements, my integrity, and my ability to build something meaningful. The peace I found wasn't in reconciling with everyone, but in being at peace with myself, knowing I had overcome not just external obstacles, but the internal ones their dismissal had created. I built new relationships, professional and personal, based on mutual respect and shared values. My team at Lucia Logistics and Eco Solutions became like a second family, one built on merit and shared goals, not obligation or outdated hierarchies. Ricardo eventually faded into the background. I heard he was living a quiet life, no longer involved in business. The empire he had presided over was now run by the cleaner he had laughed at. The irony was profound, a silent testament to the fact that true power comes not from inheritance or status, but from vision, hard work, and adaptability. The scars of the early dismissal remained, a reminder of the pain of being unseen and undervalued, but they weren't open wounds anymore. They were healed lines, marks of a battle fought and won, not with aggression, but with quiet determination and strategic brilliance. I hadn't sought revenge, but I had achieved something far more powerful: complete and utter independence, built on the foundation of my own strength and vision. My life was mine now, defined by my choices, my successes, and my boundaries. And that was a freedom worth more than any family fortune. So that's my story. It's a story about business, yes, but it's much more about finding your voice and refusing to let other people's limitations define you. It's about the quiet power in building something yourself, piece by painstaking piece. That laughter at the dinner table? For years, it felt like a cage. Now, it just sounds distant, like a strange echo from a past life. It has no power over me anymore. I built my own table, and I get to decide who has a seat. If you're in a situation where you feel unseen, where your dreams are being dismissed, please know you're not alone. Your passion is valid, and your work, no matter how small it seems to others, matters. Don't let anyone else write your story for you. You have the strength within you to build something incredible, something that is uniquely yours. Thank you for listening. If this resonated with you, please give it a like. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. And share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear about your experiences. Remember, your worth is not up for negotiation. You are capable, you are strong, and you are enough, exactly as you are.